The turning point came 3 months ago. I was banking, the one task they hadn't managed to take away from me yet, when I noticed a significant discrepancy. More money was missing than usual, but this time there was a paper trail. A new business account at First National in the names of Henry Williams, Hank's legal name, and Richard Dawson, my husband and son-in-law. My hands were shaking as I drove to the bank. The manager, Jim Colton, had been a friend of ours for 30 years. His father had given us our first business loan when no one else wanted to lend to us. "I need to know about this account, Jim," I said, holding out the statement to him. He didn't meet my gaze. "You know, Ellie, I can't discuss accounts that don't involve you." "Jim, look at me." I waited until he did. 40 years we've been coming here. You were at my daughter's christening. I need to know what my husband and son-in-law do." He sighed and looked at the closed door of his office. "I shouldn't have to tell you this, but for the past 6 months they've been transferring substantial funds into this account. He hesitated. "And what, Jim?" "They've been meeting with commercial realtors. They say they're considering a location in Austin. Something about an upscale barbecue concept." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just stealing our restaurant, they were planning to open a competing business, using my recipes, my techniques, my lifelong knowledge. "Thank you," was all I could say, picking up my purse with shaky hands. "What are you going to do?" asked Jim. I squared my shoulders. Something I should have done years ago. That night, I didn't get into an argument with Hank. Instead, I went through his phone while he slept, forwarded emails, and took screenshots of text messages with Rick. The evidence was compelling. They planned to open their new restaurant in 3 months. They had already attracted investors, promising them authentic recipes with a modern twist. My recipes. My life's work. The next morning, I called my cousin Marion, who turned out to be the best divorce attorney in the Tri-County area. "It's time," was all I said. She had been waiting for this call for years. Then I called a staff meeting at the restaurant before it opened. Everyone except Hank and Rick, who always showed up late these days. "I need to know who's with me," I said to our 15 employees, many of whom had been with us for over a decade. I laid out the gist of what was going on: the theft, the betrayal, the plans to open a competing restaurant. Carlos, our pitmaster with 20 years' experience, spoke first. "We're with you, Ms. Ellie. Always have been with you." One by one, everyone nodded. Even young Jake, who Rick had hired, and I was sure he was loyal to him. "They offered me to be assistant manager at the new place," Jake admitted. "But the way they talk about you when you're not around, it's not right. You gave me a chance when no one wanted to hire an ex-con. I'm not forgetting that." I laid out my plan. Everyone agreed to their roles. Then we got to work as usual. When Hank and Rick finally walked into the restaurant at 10 a.m., everything seemed normal. I stood at the register and smiled at the customers. The smokers were working their asses off. The lunch rush was building up. At exactly noon, when the restaurant was busiest, Marion walked in with Sheriff Dawson, thankfully not related to Rick, and my accountant, Ben. "What's up?" demanded Hank as they approached the counter where he and Rick were looking over some papers, what I understood to be plans for their new establishment. "Henry Williams," the sheriff said formally, "I have a warrant to seize financial records related to an alleged embezzlement at Smoky Barrel BBQ, LLC." Silence reigned in the restaurant. All the diners turned to stare. "This is ridiculous," Rick muttered. "Tell them." "Ellie," I stepped forward, trying to make my voice sound confident. "The embezzlement has been recorded for 7 years, with a significant increase in the last 6 months. Approximately $347,000 has been taken from business accounts. Hank's face went pale. Ellie, baby, let's talk about this in private. How did you and Rick talk in private about opening a competing restaurant using my recipes? Recipes that, according to our articles of incorporation, are my intellectual property? I smiled sweetly. I don't think we need privacy for that conversation. What followed, I must admit, gave me deep satisfaction. The sheriff and Ben walked through the office, seizing documents and computer records. Marion handed Hank the divorce papers right on the spot, and I changed the locks while they stood there in shock. But the best part? I took a reporter from the local paper out to lunch that day. Purely by accident, of course. The article came out the next morning. Local barbecue matriarch reveals family betrayal and saves legacy business. The support from the community was overwhelming. Customers lined up all over the neighborhood. Local business owners offered legal and financial support. Even my daughter Melissa, after getting over the initial shock, was supportive. I had no idea, she said, tears streaming down her face. Rick told me that a separate account was an unexpected retirement fund for you and Daddy. It broke my heart that her marriage was crumbling along with mine, but some betrayals can't be forgiven. She, too, filed for divorce and temporarily moved into her old room in my house. As for the restaurant, things are going better than ever. I've promoted Carlos to co-manager, and we're discussing the possibility of opening a small second establishment, legally, with proper profit sharing among the employees who have supported me. Hank and Rick? Last I heard, they were trying to open their own barbecue place in Houston, but investors backed out after our story hit the regional news. Turns out people don't like dealing with known embezzlers. And without my recipes, which they never wrote down but only assumed they could replicate, they have a hard time coming up with a menu worth paying for. The divorce is not yet finalized, but Marion assures me that with the evidence we have, I will get the house, the restaurant, and substantial compensation. Not bad for a woman they thought was past her prime. So, gentlemen, let me ask you this. Have you ever underestimated someone because of their age or gender? Have you ever thought that kindness meant weakness, that patience meant accepting mistreatment? Because, as I can tell you from experience, the most dangerous adversary is someone you've never met, someone who knows all your secrets because you thought she wasn't paying attention. In my 60s, I'm just starting out. The restaurant is thriving. I've started doing barbecue classes on the weekends, and yes, I've even started dating again, with a widower who owns the hardware store on the next street and looks at me like I'm a princess in this town. Life has a way of doing justice when you least expect it. Sometimes it just needs a little help in the form of a secret sauce that's been simmering for years, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. How about you? Have you ever had to stand up and fight for what is rightfully yours? Have you faced a situation head-on or carefully planned your strategy like I did? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power. Sometimes the most beautiful part of life begins just when others think your story is ending.